Hello, I'm Hannah Cruz, and this is the Church Musician's Assistant. I just got done attending the Hymn Society conference, which was awesome this year. That conference was all about how do we sing welcome. And I've been thinking about that this week. I've also been thinking about contemporary song and how to pull it off in a more traditional setting, because I'm doing some contemporary songs with the VBS kids this coming week, and also with our Haitian partners from Haiti who are coming to visit and doing a conference. So those two things I've been thinking about, and this video is going to combine those two thoughts. So I think that exposing our congregations, inviting them into the process of singing contemporary styles of music is part of singing welcome. Contemporary music genres have become part of the identity of many Christians in all age groups, of all ethnicities all around the world. So these genres are part of our Christian language now, and it is our responsibility as music leaders, as song leaders in the church, to bring these into our worship settings. But here's the issue. Some of these songs fall into genres that simply don't enrich certain contexts. Let me explain that a little more. So the context I'm referring to is what people call traditional worship. And I don't love the word traditional. It's problematic for many reasons that I won't get into today. By traditional, I mean congregations that are steeped in Western hymnody, usually from a physical book of hymns. They are steeped in organ or piano music, and often a more regimented liturgy. But because contemporary worship songs don't necessarily fit into that traditional aesthetic, does not mean that we have to relegate that genre to the contemporary worship service at 5 o'clock on Sunday, or that we have to dismiss the genre altogether. The magic of music arranging allows for the creative use of any melody or lyrics in your unique worship context. Now, I have pretty much always played in what you might call a traditional setting. So I've had a lot of experience now in taking more modern sounding songs and translating them into an aesthetic that is successful in a traditional worship context. So I have found that there is one main factor, there are lots of factors, but one main factor that tends to impact the success or the acceptance of a contemporary worship song in a traditional worship context. And that factor is the amount of digital manipulation involved in the performance. So let me talk about this in terms of a continuum, because I think of the musical aesthetic here in terms of a spectrum from acoustic, like totally raw, to the other end, which is highly computer processed, digitally manipulated, however you want to characterize that. In an acoustic performance, you find mechanical instruments rather than electronic instruments, and natural voices playing live with no digital interference, except possibly for some amplification just for the sake of volume balancing, but not for the sake of distorting the sound or changing the sound. In a digitally enhanced performance, you would find computer generated effects, audio signal processing, which alters the sound of amplified instruments. And you also might find synthesized timbres. As examples of this, think of like acoustic bluegrass on one end of the spectrum, and then like techno dance music on the other end of the spectrum. And Christian musicians like the Gettys or Hillsong, these are people everyone will know. Those musicians fall somewhere in the middle, right? They are using some acoustic elements and some digital enhancements. When we are looking at performing a contemporary worship song in a traditional worship context, we must usually translate what we love about the existing recording into a live performance in a sanctuary. So there's a gap there. We have to figure out what to do about the differences in those two scenarios, a recording versus live performance in a sanctuary. So the first and most obvious method is attempt to precisely replicate the recording. Now, some churches have the means to do such a thing. They have the right space, the right equipment, the right staff, etc. But it's not congruous with the worship aesthetic. In most traditional scenarios, I think this method is entirely impractical, as in not possible with the existing resources, and also I think it's inappropriate. Now, our second method is arrange the song in a new way that enhances your worship context. And this is where the continuum I spoke of earlier comes in handy. Most people have no problem with a song's chords or its form or even its lyrics. What they might have a problem with a little bit is instrumentation sometimes, but the bigger thing they're going to complain about is what they call style. It boils down to whether that piece of music blends and complements the existing worship aesthetic. So, how can we as music leaders in the church arrange songs acoustically for these traditional contexts? And you know how I've defined traditional. I don't love that word, but we're using it to get the point across today. Let's first look at some common instrumental ensemble choices. Many contemporary worship songs employ electric guitar, right? Electric bass or something for the bass. Bass is important. Synthesized keyboards, a drum kit, or a drum machine, which is like a programmed beat. A lot of times effect pedals, which distort amplified sounds and change the timbres, and sometimes even pre-recorded samples. Electrified instruments such as the guitar and the bass, those can be translated into the acoustic guitar and the acoustic bass, or the string bass, or the cello, right? For that more acoustic feel. Synthesizer parts can often be played by the pipe organ, actually, or orchestral instruments like the strings, brass, woodwinds. Perhaps surprisingly, the pipe organ actually fits into these contemporary ensembles pretty well when used for the sake of ambiance or like bass enhancement. So usually you would use it to like sustain chords underneath other instruments that are creating rhythm and texture. Drum kit or drum machine parts can be translated just back into the drum kit. A lot of times churches are fine with that. But if you want to pare it down a little bit more, go with the cajon. The cajon is an awesome multi-purpose percussion instrument. Small, portable, it creates a low tone as well as a snare tone, and some cajons even have little cymbals on them to give you that ringing sound as well. And anyone who has a good sense of pulse can learn how to play simple grooves on the cajon. So definitely get one of those for your church. Even if you don't use it for contemporary stuff, you can use it for global music and many, many more genres. Obviously, the piano is probably your most universal instrument, the best tool to have around, along with the guitar if you have a guitar player, because the piano, it's just so versatile. It can play heavy bass lines, it can give you that percussive chordal background, or it can just add color and texture and improvisational lines above other instrumentation. So if your resources are slim, I personally would opt for the piano and a vocalist. Let's go beyond instrumentation now. Rather than imitate amplification and distortion that you might hear in recordings, maybe strive for more intimacy and clarity in your live performance. With that goal of intimacy, use microphones to balance your ensemble and make sure all parts are heard equally, rather than using microphones to elevate the overall volume. This type of balancing would be necessary, for example, if you were combining the organ, which may have a bigger presence in the room, with something with a tinny sound like an acoustic guitar. Another tip, and this might seem obvious, but make the song your own rather than trying to imitate exactly how the original sounds in the recording. Maybe you could change the tempo to create a slightly different mood. For example, I recently took a contemporary song written for the VBS kids. It's a very up-tempo dance feel, but the text is about the water and the wine and coming to the table. So on the piano, I'm doing it in an acoustic way at a bit of a slower tempo so that we can meditate on that text in an intimate kind of way, and we're making it our own so that it flows well in our worship. Here's another example of making a song your own. So in the Hymn Society conference, Dr. Marcel Steuernagel, who was my professor at SMU when I got my master's there, he gave a talk and was talking about how in his church that he used to work at in Brazil, he took the song Seek Ye First, which, as y'all know, is a contemporary song from the 60s, and he put this Brazilian backbeat underneath it. And his Lutheran Brazilian congregation really lit up and enjoyed learning that new song because Steuernagel customized that song for his context and for that culture. In making a song your own, you could also spice up the harmonies by adding jazz chord extensions, or incorporate the Hammond organ to give it that gospel feel. There are so many possibilities. The possibilities are really limitless if you use your creativity and your arranging skills. But when resources are not available to make your imagined arrangement come to fruition, consider either A, paring down to just one chordal instrument like the piano or guitar plus voice, or B, hiring/inviting another musician in the community to come and play that song, or C, record your own backing track. And I know some of you are probably squirming in your chairs, recalling past traumatic experiences of canned music, but that's not really what I'm talking about. Pre-recorded parts can be weaved into an acoustic performance naturally and tastefully, if blend is considered carefully. By blend here I mean, think gentle timbres, nothing too jarring, background presence, in the mix. So it's not popping out at everyone. It's just creating a fullness to the sound. And also an appropriate volume through the speakers, something that's not much louder than the acoustic performers. Last, I advise arranging songs in a way that invites in congregational participation, so that you're not singing at the congregation, but you're involving them in the experience. You may need to change the key of the original song to suit both high and low amateur voices, because y'all know sometimes these pop style songs, maybe it's sung by a guy and he's just singing in his chest voice and it's way too low for the ladies. Or the opposite is true, and a lady is singing these high awesome notes, but no amateur singer could ever achieve that. So keep the key in mind. You might need to emphasize the melody line a little bit more than the recording does also. So you know, you might need to prioritize melody over the ensemble feel. And definitely make sure that someone, if not you, is ready to bring the congregation in. Whether they cue the congregation through a physical gesture or an oral cue, like shouting out to the congregation their next line. Or maybe it's a written cue as well, like it says it in the bulletin or on their sheet music. Get the choir involved as well, so they're not just sitting in the choir loft with nothing to do during the contemporary song. So if parts don't exist in the song, then write some. Write some simple harmony parts, usually thirds and fourths are going to work great because the chords tend to be really simple. Try for at least one lower part. Usually that alto or tenor line underneath the melody sounds amazing in contemporary songs. And then sometimes a descant-like line also sounds great, especially during a chorus. Towards the end of the song, when the chorus is building and building, a higher part can really complement the arrangement. And remember, you can always teach these parts to your singers by rote. You do not have to write all of this out, because I know that's quite a bit of effort. You can also encourage your singers, your more gifted singers, I suppose, to improvise some harmony parts. If they are able, let them do that by ear. But my last tip is actually to write out at least the melody and print out that sheet music for your congregation, if not for your choir, because a lot of times people steeped in Western hymnody, for them, holding a piece of paper with the text and the melody is very comforting, and many of them are able to follow the trajectory of that melody line, and they treat it like it's part of the hymnal. So that can just help the whole experience feel more comfortable and come across as a success. No matter your church context though, I hope you guys will not shy away from contemporary worship repertoire. I am not an expert in contemporary worship music. Like I said, I've pretty much always worked in a more traditional context, but that doesn't stop me from trying all different genres. I believe you have all the tools you need to arrange songs to suit your worship aesthetic, and you should use those tools to get across your theological goals. Inviting into worship all sorts of music making mirrors the invitational behavior we ought to be showing our neighbors. And as song leaders in the church, we are in a powerful position, honestly, to do that, to use music to share the peace of Christ with others, and to invite everyone into opening their arms to the community. So that is not only our power, but I think it's our responsibility. And bringing contemporary worship genre into our churches is just one tiny step in that direction. Okay, I hope you have gotten something out of this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, The Church Musician's Assistant. It's free. All that does is it's gonna notify you when new videos come out, and hopefully you want to see the new videos and they are helpful to you. So again, thank you for watching. Until next time, blessings in your music ministries.